Good. All right. Second Nietzsche text. So actually, before starting, I want to go over some of what some of you said. I want to go over some of your comments. Also, I was looking at the grade book, and I was really happy actually with the class in general, in terms of, not in terms of handing in your test on time, but that needs improvement, but in terms of like being regular, doing the reading assignments, coming to class. I'm really happy with you guys. Maybe a few people aren't doing it, but most of you are really doing great. So I just wanted to, commend you on that. Okay, so a few of your questions. So if you recall, Nietzsche compares idealists with theologians. How many of you saw this passage? Put your hand in the screen, where he's kind of like saying, oh, you guys are the same, right? And one of you was like, well, no, because idealists, those are the scientists, why should they be on the same level as theologians? Any one of you was able to figure this out? Why are they the same? Anyone want to try? Give us an explanation? Okay. All right, so I will. So remember that Nietzsche is really against this attitude of escaping life, right? Making up stories in order to not have to look at life in the face, and to life, because life is not a storybook, right? Life is chaotic, fragmented. We don't know where it's going. We don't know how it's going to end, right? It's not like a beautiful story at all. And so what unites the idealists with the theologians is that they both create stories, alternative stories to life, right? We know that we're going to study today how Christian theologians do that, right? How they create an alternate reality, right? To and in a way escape facing life as it really shows itself. But idealists do the same thing, right? When you have an idealist saying that reason, right, will bring about the progress of humanity into a new era, right? This is one of the ideas of idealism, right? You're having a same thing. You're telling a story which has nothing to do with reality, right? Does that make sense? I forgot which one of you was complaining, but am I making sense in how they are the same? Put your hand in the screen if you're following. Okay, so I just wanted to respond to that because I thought it was a good question, actually. Some of you were struggling with Hyperboreans, right? Nietzsche compares himself, or he's saying he is a Hyperborean. So you were like, what the hell? What is that? So he describes it a little bit, right? In the footnote, right? This is a race, a human group, a group of people dwelling beyond the north wind. Okay, so they are kind of beyond this world, right? And so he's saying, I mean, it's almost contradictory, right? Because he's not supposed to escape. But I think he's talking about going beyond the matrix that we have made up, right? Matrix, like the movie, right? In other words, he's so fed up with all of the stories we tell each other. Whether we are philosophers or theologians, we're all telling stories about what reality really is, right? And he's saying, I'm not one of you. I'm a Hyperborean, right? I live in the land of ice and winter, and I'm not afraid to face the cold. That's the idea, right? Let me say that again, right? In case you didn't follow, right? He's saying, I'm not one of you people who are still on planet Earth trying to make up stories about how life should be, rather than really facing how life is, right? I'm not one of you. I'm a Hyperborean, right? I live in the land that he described. It's a cold land, right? This is a land where you have to fight, you have to struggle. You're not, kind of relaxing in a big story you tell yourself. Kind of, you're like, you're struggling against the cold. That's how he sees himself. Does that make sense? Everybody follow that? Okay. And then one last point. Yes, this famous issue of the will to power in Nietzsche, or power, right? What he means by power is his meaning in the Latin meaning. In Latin, power is potens, from which we get our notion of potential, right? So when he's talking about power, he's talking about the inner potential that's in you and that is able to blossom. It's not about domination, right? We're not talking, that's violence, right? Violence is power which dominates. He's talking about simply you reaching your potential, your potens, right? Which is the Latin word for power. So it's about you, your life blossoming, right? So in other words, for Nietzsche, for example, an artist, right, who follows their vocation or their calling and is painting and is completely, successful, that's a powerful man, right? Or the woman, right, who follows her, maybe she wants to be a scientist and she's like, wow, she's discovering things and she's in her full power, all of her potential, all of her gifts, all of her talents, all of the inner life that is longing to, right, be birthed. She is birthing in the scientific endeavor or in the art or even in the family, right? That's what he means by power. He means potential, the ability to fully come, to blossom fully in your power, in your potence, in your potential. So it's never about domination. And so when you get to that level of power where you're in your full potential, you become natural leader. People follow you, right? Because you're fully blossomed, right? But you don't even need to impose anything. People just are inspired by you. And in that sense, you have power over others in the sense that you inspire, not in the sense that you dominate, right? Does this make sense? Are you a little clearer on power, the issue of power? Okay, good. Any other questions that anyone wants me to clarify before we get in the text? Okay, good. Let's get in the text. So this particular text, I'm going to be on page, where am I going to be? Page 137. So this particular text that we're going to study is easy to read, very difficult to respond to. In fact, the first time I came across some of those ideas that Nietzsche is talking about, and I had come across these ideas in other works that we're going to talk about too, it took me almost 10 years to really respond to this criticism that he's giving to Christianity, right? The first criticism we studied last time, I gave a quick response from the Gospels. It was a piece of cake, right? This one, it's going to take a while to really respond to this criticism, right? We're going to try at the end of class to discuss a little bit. And then as we continue in the semester, when we do Marcel, when we do Levinas, I'll refer back to this text because I'm going to be attempting to respond as the semester unravels. But for now, let's study this particular text. So, summary, before we go into the text, right? This is the second criticism of Nietzsche against Christianity, right? The first one, remember, was that Christianity was nihilistic, right? We talked about this last time. Nihilistic, meaning it was hateful of life, right? And therefore it hated human passions, right? What are passions? Remind me, what are passions? Let's see if you remember the definition I gave you. What's a passion? And why is it so dangerous in the eyes of Christianity? Anybody remember? Let's review.
Passions are things that like, oh, sorry. Should I raise my hand?
No, go ahead, it's fine.
Okay. Passions are like things that bring you into the world, and Christianity was really against that, in that they thought that the world was inherently bad. Therefore, Nietzsche thought that Christianity was being nihilistic because it made you pull out of the world, and passions pull you into the world.
Very good. Very, very good definition, right? Passions pull you into the world. Passions are the world calling to you, right? Anything you desire is caused by the world saying, eat me, have me, possess me, take me, right? So our desires is what is us being called into the world, right? Our desires is the world calling to us. And of course, since the world, according to Christianity, is corrupt, we shouldn't enter the world nor listen to these inner voices that are drawing us into the world, right? So passions are immediately demonized as mortal sins, right? And this is the issue with Nietzsche, his issue with Christianity. Today we're going to look at the second problem, which is the problem of Christianity being delusional. And this is the more difficult problem, right? So according to Nietzsche, just to summarize the argument, in case you didn't get it yet, Christianity is unable to face our suffering and our human condition, right? And in fact, most of us aren't. It's not just Christianity, right? But most of us aren't, as human beings, capable of facing how chaotic and uncontrollable life is, right? I mean, imagine you could die tomorrow. Your best friend could die tomorrow. The person you love could die tomorrow. Anything could happen at any moment. It's frightening. It's terrifying, right? And so he says Christianity was born out of people who couldn't stand to see this. And so they create this alternative reality, this story, just to help them navigate this horrifying reality, right? So we create a story in order to, which replaces reality, and we tell ourselves a different story so that we can navigate reality without losing our minds, right? And so he says Christianity and world religions in general, right, are born out of this collective storytelling, this collective delusion that is meant to help us remain sane in the face of this terrifying reality. Okay, so that's really how religion arose. He's really kind of analyzing what birthed religion. How did religion arise in our psyche, right, as human beings? How did we create religion? Because for him, religion is a creation. So he says it's because we were so miserable with reality that we had to tell a story to make it all better, which ends well, right, of course. And now we are just looking at that story and ignoring what is going on around us so that we can navigate, right? So that's in essence, right, what his criticism. He's not the first one to do that. There's two other people that I would like you to look into if you like this argument, is Freud and Marx. Both came up with the same analysis, right? Freud, for example, in his book, The Future of an Illusion. And by the way, I would really, if you haven't read Freud yet, right, do. It's very good, right? He has amazing, some books are really good, especially the ones on psychology. He has some other books on religion, but, and he has a really good book on the interpretation of dreams. Just a side note, right? If any of you have a dream that ever needs interpreted, you can stay after class and I'll do it for you based on Freud's method, which works, right? I've done it a lot for like 20 years now. I've been using this method to interpret even my own dreams. It's very good. So I would suggest, right, in addition to reading his works on psychology and his works now, The Future of an Illusion, also read his work on dreams, right? It's called The Interpretation of Dreams, simply. The Interpretation. Yeah, okay, great. So Subhan Kulova is saying there's a Netflix about it. So it's like a documentary, Subhan Kulova?
Yeah, it's like one season. It has about dreams and it's crazy. I forgot, but
okay, great.
It's really interesting.
Good. So yes, I would try to watch it or try to get the book, right? Or if you have a very important dream you want interpreted, I can show you the method, right? But anyways, we need to go back to The Future of an Illusion, right? But he's fascinating. He's one of the most brilliant writers, right, of the 20th century, in my view. He's also the most cynical writer, right? He's a mixture of genius and cynicism, which is kind of difficult if you're an idealist. But he's so brilliant, you forgive him everything, right? So good. So going back to The Future of an Illusion, right? In that book, he makes the following argument. He gives a psychological reason for the birth of religion. He says, you know, all of us feel like strangers in the world. We feel orphaned, right? Even if we had parents, right? They were usually sometimes dysfunctional, or, you know, now they're dead, or, you know, it's not working. We always feel, even if we have family and parents, all of us feel a little bit orphaned in the world, exiled, not at home. And so he says humanity, tired of feeling so alienated, decided to create this vision of an, you know, heavenly father, right? Heavenly family, a heavenly father who protects us, who loves us, who cares for us, who gives us a happy ending. And same idea as Nietzsche, right? This is a story we have created in our minds, that there is some kind of, you know, father figure, powerful force which is on our side. Because why we create this? Because we want it so much, right? This is the argument for Freud. Freud argues that when we want something really bad, we start to create that reality. Let me give you an example. Suppose you have a crush on someone and you want them really bad, right? Now, suppose they ignore you usually, but one day out of the blue, they text you. How is your sick mind going to interpret that text? Because you want them so much. How are you going to interpret that text? Yes, Leon, oh, they love me. Maybe they like me. And now your sick mind, right, which wants it so much, creating this reality because you desire it so much. The pain of that lack is so profound and you want it so bad that you create it, that you project it, right? So Freud is saying that religion is a kind of projection of what we desire so badly and don't have. Right, so similar argument, right, from as Nietzsche. And then finally you have Marx, who has the very famous quote. Anybody know what the most famous quote on religion by Marx? Tell the class. Nobody knows. All right. This is the quote. I'm gonna write it down here in the chat. Religion is the opium of the masses. Sound familiar? Let me see. How many of you knew this? Put your hand in the screen. Nobody? How many of you knew this quote? 2 people. Okay. Now all of you do. Very important quote. So let's have a little background on Marx, right? Some of you don't know who he is. So this was someone, right? He's the father of socialism, right? That is often freaking people out in this country, but socialism is nothing but simply the redistribution of wealth so that everybody gets a fair share. This is in essence socialism. So of course for this, if you have wealthy people who have and then you have the have-nots, in order to have this redistribution, you actually need some kind of revolution. It's not going to happen naturally, right? The rich are not going to naturally start redistributing their wealth. So you have to have a revolution, but to have a revolution, you have to have a degree of discontent. You have to have people who are pissed off about something. Now, if you're a religious person, constantly thinking about the crown you will get in heaven after you die, can you become that angry person that is needed for a revolution? What's going to happen with a bunch of Christians? You're trying to start a revolution. Is it going to work? What do you think?
No, because there's always like a happy ending, so like why change our reality?
Exactly, right? If anyways it's going to be okay, and it's not in my hands, right? Christianity also has this kind of problematic view that we are very passive. God does everything. It's not in our hands. There's nothing we can do, right? And so he's dealing with a bunch of Christians. He's trying to start a revolution, but all of them are high on opium. Opium is that heroin of the time, right? So all of them are shooting heroin. Can you have a revolution with a bunch of junkies? No, they're happy already, right? Yes, Karl Marx. Yes, Ucho. This is the one I'm talking about. And yes, founder of communism, Ucho, or socialism. Right. So here he's dealing with a bunch of what he considers to be junkies, religious junkies. And he's like, I can't do a revolution with these people. They're already high. And so that's why in a moment of despair and frustration, right, he pens this famous quote, religion is the opium of the masses and they are high as a kite and I cannot do anything with them. There will be no revolution because of this very toxic religiosity that they are ingesting, right? Very powerful criticism, right? So all of them, right? Nietzsche, Marx, Freud are making this similar argument, right? So let's, and again, right, this is very difficult because, I mean, personally, right, when I first read this, I was thinking, damn, what if they're right? What if all of this is a big story we tell ourselves, right? What if all the religion I was taught or grew up in, right? What if it is a massive collective delusion or a big story we've written up, right? I mean, it's very difficult to not begin to doubt a little bit, right? When you start to hear this kind of alternative scenario, right? So let's look at the text, right? Let's see what he says exactly. Any questions so far before we go in the text? Okay, go to page 137. All right, so I'm on the paragraph 15 where it says in Christianity. And everybody there, put your hand in the screen. Okay. In Christianity, he says, neither morality nor religion come into contact with reality at any point. Topic sentence, right? In Christianity, he says, nothing comes into contact with reality. It's all a big story. There is nothing real about it. And then he begins to develop this idea. And he says that we are in fact constructing these imaginary tales. And he has how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 six imaginary categories or beings that we construct. So let's look at each one of them. So I'm going to write them all down. First, we have imaginary causes. What's the next one? While I write, you can tell me. Imaginary what? What's the next one? After imaginary causes, look in your text. What's the next one? I'm waiting.
Imaginary effects.
Okay, imaginary effects. Then what? What's the next one? Imaginary what?
Psychology.
Before that, beings, imaginary beings, and then imaginary psychology. I'm typing it all up for you. Imaginary psychology, and then, oh, before that, imaginary natural science, right? And then imaginary psychology. And then finally, what's the last one? Imaginary teleology. Okay, some of you don't want to speak up because you don't know what these words are. Okay, great. Let's look at each one of these. What does he mean when he says that Christianity has invented imaginary causes, imaginary effects, imaginary beings, imaginary science, imaginary psychology, and imaginary teleology? So let's look first at imaginary causes. In other words, he's saying Christianity has invented causes. Causes to what? What's the main cause we need to know as a human being to feel safe in the world? What is the ultimate cause we want to find out? You know, we want to know about in order to relax in our existence. So that's less a cause than this is Alim. The afterlife is the imaginary teleology. We'll talk about it. Teleology means the end. So the afterlife is about, we want to see the end, but we also want to see what in order to feel safe, which is the opposite of the end. What would feel good to know? I want to see the end, but I also want to see what? Yes, the beginning. Excellent, Cruz, right? So it would be great, right, to know that somebody created us and loved us and brought us into being, and now they're there, right? I mean, the creation story in the Bible is beautiful, right? You have God stooping down, picking up some clay, shaping it, and then he breathes, right, his life into the clay, and then lovingly puts it in the garden, right? Nietzsche's like, wow, right? That's one big story, right? About an imaginary cause that maybe, right, we were made lovingly by a creator. Feels good to know that, by the way, right? As soon as you know you have a creator who lovingly made you, you feel like, oh, I have meaning, right? I'm here for a purpose. I'm loved, right? And Nietzsche is like, well, this is all beautiful and nice, but is it true, right? That's his question. In other words, for Nietzsche, that's a great story. I love it, but I wish it was true. But is it true, right? Or is it just something we have invented? Imaginary cause. Everybody clear on one of the imaginary causes we come up with? Okay, only one person? Put your hand. Okay, now let's look at the other one. Imaginary effects. Okay, so now here he's talking about how religious people sometimes talk about something that happened to them, an experience they had with God, right? Which transformed them. So for example, what are some of the examples of imaginary effects that Nietzsche lists? Tell me. So these are things that happen to us, right? These are moments of transformation where we are impacted by something, right? Which we think is coming from God, right? So Vargas, right? We have sin. What else do we have? The more powerful ones are redemption, very good, grace, forgiveness, right? So this is, Nietzsche is now looking at those people who say, you know, I used to be an alcoholic and then God touched me and saved me, and now I am transformed. I have been affected by God. God has transformed me, has had an impact on me. And Nietzsche is like, well, how you know it's God? Maybe it's just you. Maybe it's just because you found some community. Maybe it's just because you finally got yourself together. Why are you creating this imaginary effect, right? So he's now shedding doubt on many experiences of redemption, of grace, of forgiveness that Christians talk about and use to justify, right, their faith in God. They say, well, God moved me, God changed me, God transformed me. And Nietzsche is like, how you know it's God? Maybe it's just you. Right? So now again, imaginary effect. Clear? Put your hand up. Okay. Now let's go to imaginary beings. That one is easy. What's the biggest imaginary being? And then we have some lesser ones. Give me a list. God is the biggest one that we created. And then we have some lesser imaginary beings that we think exist. What would they be? So souls, spirits, the devil, very good. What? Aliens? No, Cho. No, priests are not imaginary beings, Subon Kulova. They're real. But for example, angels, right? Anything that's we don't see. A priest I see, right? So he's saying, see, they have created a whole cast of characters which don't exist so that we can feel, make sense of life. Oh, I did something terrible. I killed someone. Well, it's the devil. It's not me, right? Or, you know, I feel safe. I feel it's going to be good. My angel is protecting me. What a beautiful idea, says Nietzsche, if only it was true, right? Yes, cherubs, Liang, absolutely, right? So we have created, according to Nietzsche, this cast of characters that either explain why we're so bad or explain why we're feeling so good. It feels safe to know that we have an angel and a God and that our bad actions are the devil's fault, not our fault. Again, all imaginary, says Nietzsche. Okay, let's go to the other one, imaginary science. So this one I will explain because this one takes a little more knowledge of Nietzsche. So this is the idea in science. So notice he says anthropocentric, right? Anthropocentric means human-centered. Okay, let me write it down. Human-centered. Okay, meaning the human is at the center. Now, when we study science, especially natural science, let's look, for example, at the only science we have right now, which is the theory of evolution. Theory of evolution, what is the highest evolved being in the theory of evolution? Is it the giraffe? Is it the chimpanzee? Is it? Okay, very good, right? We are, by coincidence, the highest link. We are the best. We are the most intelligent. We are the most evolved. And Nietzsche is like, that's so Christian, right? He's saying, you scientists are sounding so Christian. You're sounding like the creation story again, where same thing happens, right? God creates, first of all, nature, then he creates animals, and he creates lower animals and then more complex animals. And finally, the human being is the crown of creation. And he's like, Darwin, you think you're doing science? You're doing Bible. Right? All of you who think, all of the people who think, right, that Darwinism goes against the Bible, it doesn't. Would say Nietzsche, right? Nietzsche would say, you're sounding like the Old Testament right now, Darwin. Don't you realize it? So this whole idea, right, that mankind is the most evolved species. He's saying, how we know this? It's too easy to go around thinking you're the best, right? He says, this is a Christian idea. You find this idea in the biblical creation story, right? So he's saying Darwin is thinking he's doing something so subversive, actually sounding like an old biblical scholar, right? So that's the imaginary science, right? Okay, so a couple questions. Yeah, so Ucho, say your question. Go ahead, tell us what you mean.
I think he's trying to say like we think we are the best because we think we are the best, but actually not. Maybe
Yeah.
there are more animals and living beings. They are the best, better than humans.
Exactly. This whole idea that we're the best, Nietzsche is saying this is another story we tell ourselves to feel good in this world. Because if we don't think we're the best, we're gonna feel so afraid that everything will devour us, that we are weak. And so we have to create this illusion, we're the superior race.
Like
Right?
like selfishness.
Yeah, it's like very like people who are very insecure, and so they have to project a very powerful image. I will say no names. Right? This is what he's talking about, right? This is people are very insecure, and they're so insecure in the world, they have to go around saying, no, 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 I'm the best. Nobody can beat me. This, and he's saying, collectively, we're doing this. We feel so insecure in the world, and it's true. We should be insecure because every animal is more qualified than us to survive. Any animal can tear us apart. Even the ant. Have you ever seen these red ants that devour human beings in the jungle? Right. So we're in a very precarious, fragile position. So we had to come up with this story that actually we're the best. Right? And he's saying this is a big story, and this is a story which is very Christian. So all of these scientists, right, who are saying, yes, obviously we are the most evolved species, he's saying, you guys are just a bunch of, closet Christians. Does that make sense? Am I clear? See your hands? Okay, good. This is a carnage. We're butchering. This is a massacre, right? This is a very difficult text to swallow, especially if you have some religious background. Here's the next one, imaginary psychology. So again, I'll mention this one too, right? Imaginary psychology. This is this whole range of emotions that Christianity, according to Nietzsche, has invented. For example, the feeling of guilt. Says Nietzsche, no one had this feeling until Christianity came around and said, this is bad. You should be guilty about that. Before Christianity, we were happily moving through life, nourishing ourselves, enjoying life without any guilt. We were happy. And then Christianity came in with its hatred of the world and started to say, that over there, that's a sin, and this is a sin, and that's a sin. And now Christianity has manufactured this guilt that some of us feel, whether we like it or not, because we have 2,000 years of Christian teaching behind us in our DNA. Now some of us are feeling these artificial feelings of guilt for things that are absolutely innocent, right? And Nietzsche is saying, see, Christianity has fabricated this psychology, this mindset, these feelings, right? Imaginary psychology. And finally, imaginary teleology. Let's look at that word. Teleology, from the Greek telos, which means the end. So this is looking at the future, our destination as a humankind. What have we invented for the ending of our human civilization? Alim, you can tell us now what you were saying before. What's one ending we have invented? Very good, Alim, right? The afterlife, that's another big story. Or anything, reincarnation, the day of judgment, right? The second coming of Jesus, the Messiah. All stories, says Nietzsche, so that we can finally face the future without shaking. Right? That's again a big story we explain to ourselves. And then he continues, and now this is the last, this is the how do you call this when you're beating up someone and this is the blow that kills them? Is there an expression for this? We have an expression in French, but do you have it in English? Knocked out. Yes, but I mean the blow. What's the name of the blow? The last blow that kills you. Do you have a word for that? No? Okay. Well, this is the last blow. Okay, I'll teach you. This is in French, coup de grâce. Coup means the blow, right? And grâce is actually grace. It's funny in French, doesn't make sense, does it? Which means that is the blow that finishes you off. Right? So the last blow that Nietzsche is giving now, when he explains what kind of people came up with these stories, read with me to the last second line, the last two lines, sorry, but that explains everything. Do you see it? Put your hand in the screen, but that explains everything. Okay. So now he's going to explain why people started to create these stories. That explains everything. who alone has reason to lie himself out of actuality. In other words, who is the kind of person that would want to create these lies, these delusions, these stories in order to escape actuality, to escape reality? He says, he who suffers from it. And he's saying, but he who suffers from actuality means to be an abortive actuality. In other words, he's saying, is these people who are suffering, not only suffering, but too cowardly to really face their suffering. He calls them abortive, like little abortions. They were never truly born, right? These are people who are not able to really enter life. That's what he calls abortive, right? Like an abortion. They were aborted. They're not able to really be born, enter, face life. And he's saying, it's those cowards, right, who suffer. That's okay, you can suffer. He's fine with suffering. He himself suffered, but what he doesn't like, what he dislikes or despises, are those who suffer and who are scared to suffer, and so they want to stop suffering, and they create this reality, right? So he says, part of being a human being is to learn to suffer, is to learn to face life in all of its terror, and learn to suffer in a way that's dignified and graceful, right? And that's really, and we've talked about this, right? How to suffer when we studied Rumi and Maimonides, right? The whole class is really about suffering, right? And so this is another perspective, right? Nietzsche says we have to learn to suffer with courage, with dignity, and not always try to escape and create stories, right? So that's the idea here, right? Okay, so very, very powerful text, very, not necessarily true, but certainly very authentic, right? This is an authentic, legitimate criticism, which we have to think about seriously, right? Remember, I told you, if you come from a religious background, or if you have yourself a faith, right? A belief in a religion, Nietzsche is really the rite of passage into a deeper understanding, into a more mature spirituality, right? So now we really need to stop a little bit and talk about how we can respond to Nietzsche, right? Is there a way to respond to Nietzsche and disagree with him? How would you, if you were having a conversation with Nietzsche about this and you have a religious background, what are some of the arguments you could give him to prove him wrong? Anybody want to try their hand at this? This is difficult. Anybody want to try? Okay, Leon, go ahead.
Actually, I had a question, but maybe it ties into actually rebuttaling against what you're saying.
Okay.
But I have a question about when you were mentioning that Nietzsche says something about how science is anthropocentric, which is human-centered. But I felt like what Darwin was talking about was because I thought Christian was being like God-centered, not human-centered. You get what I'm saying? Like I think Darwin is putting humans up, I guess, like higher than God. Is that what I'm understanding, or is it like something's not clicking?
What he's saying, I think, when he says natural science is anthropocentric, he's saying in the way we do science, we are following the biblical concept that in this world, we are the highest entity. This is a biblical concept. Not in the universe. In the universe, God is higher. But in this world, we're the we're the ones in charge, right? Based on the biblical narrative. So he's saying when science goes around saying we're the highest evolved species, we're in charge,
Yeah.
they're simply parroting the biblical narrative, right? In this world, we are the highest ones. So in that sense, they agree with Christianity.
That makes sense. Thank
Okay,
you.
good. Any other questions? And then we can, or a response to how to respond to Nietzsche. This is the moment of the discussion. I'm giving you 10 minutes to try to begin to think this through. Ways of responding to Nietzsche. And if you have an idea, speak up, because it might be a good one. It might help me actually to develop my response, which I'm still working on. Silence. Everybody has been shocked into silence by Nietzsche. Okay, while you think, I'm going to introduce briefly how I'm going to respond through Levinas and Marcel. Okay, this will give us some idea where I'm going to be headed next few weeks, right? So Marcel is the next philosopher we're doing, right? So remember the argument by Freud that we desire God so badly that we create him. Okay, write this down, right? This is Freud. We desire God so badly we create him. This is also Nietzsche, right? We wish things were different, so we create, right? Marcel is actually going to zoom in on this desire. And this is the argument he's going to make, which is very interesting. He's going to say, why are we not taking this desire as a sign that there is a reality that is inspiring this desire, right? Now think about it for a second. Actually, let me write it down, right? If we have a desire, doesn't that mean that there is an object that has awakened this desire, right? And I'll give you an example in a second, that there is an object that has awakened, right? In other words, suppose all of a sudden you feel like, you know, eating something. You feel like desire for a cupcake. Would you feel this desire if you didn't know cupcake existed? What do you think? Exactly, Leon, right? We can't, this is the argument of Marcel. We can't desire something that doesn't exist, right? If we are desiring something, it's not rising out, out of the blue. There is something that provoked the desire. And therefore, Marcel goes in the opposite direction of Nietzsche. He says, we have a desire for God, therefore God exists. Well, of course, he'll go into more details, but this is one direction, right, that we're going to take. Hark Stark, finally, go ahead. I was waiting for you.
Sure, it's an interesting idea, but like, it's not really like that. Like, for example, it would be like saying, I really want some type of like amazing cake, but like I don't know what kind. And then that exists, but like maybe it does exist, maybe it doesn't, because we're not saying like, sure, we invented maybe like God, but it's like what we really want is like as we mentioned before, to know how we got here. We want like a father who created us to feel good about, which is not foreign at all. We were born, we have parents, so like it's not such a serious extrapolation, I don't think.
Ah, that's a really good argument. In other words, you're saying we want a big God because it's not like God inspired this thought. It's simply we want a father. That's good. In other words, God doesn't have to exist. All we really need is a father, right? An earthly father. So the fact that we desire comfort or desire to be comforted or desire protection, really what we're desiring, would say Nietzsche, is just a human father, but then since we can't find it, boom. Very good, Hark Stark. I like that. I hope you guys are writing this down. This is part of the discussion with Nietzsche, right? I said something and now Nietzsche, through Hark Stark, thank you for channeling Nietzsche for us today, right, is responding to me. Well, no, yeah, sure, you desire a cupcake because you've seen a cupcake, but we desire a God, not because we see a God, not because we sense there is a God, but because we simply want a father. We don't need. Excellent. Anyone want to respond to Hark Stark? It's good. Some of you would do very well. I don't know why you're not talking. No, we have been, Hark Stark has destroyed us. He has destroyed Marcel.
I just have something to say real quick.
Yes, Leon.
In terms of the imaginary theology, I don't think God necessarily has something to do like fully with the afterlife. You can think about the afterlife or what happens after you die. That doesn't correlate to Christianity. You can say after the afterlife, I become in the soil. I become part of earth. That doesn't have anything to do with God, right?
Yes, and that would be the only lucid way to see it, would say Nietzsche. Yeah, we become earth. That's it. End of story. That's not a story, it's a reality. So yeah, but then he's saying this is not very glamorous. Most religions, will not tell you just become earth. They will add something. They will say, yes, but your soul goes to heaven, right? Or
Right. Okay.
Right, so the way you put it, that would be perfect, right, if we stuck to that, but then we always have something more to say, right? Okay, Harkstark, very good. You've muted us for a while. Let me then give you, so we'll of course go again into this argument with Marcel and see if we can still survive Harkstark's lucid response, but then here's the other path, right, with Levinas, which we're going to take. So actually, let me briefly respond maybe what Marcel might say to Harkstark. That would be important to do briefly, right? So Marcel, of course, is going to talk, I wonder if I have to go into that or if I should wait, because I'd have to develop Marcel. But he's going to talk about God, not in the sense of Christianity. He's going to have a much more philosophical approach, which then might connect a little better to what Nietzsche would say. Both Levinas and Marcel, by the way, I believe, are giving arguments that would sound good in Nietzsche's ears, right? In fact, both of them are writing with full knowledge of what Nietzsche has written, and their response actually are responses that I believe that Nietzsche might have been satisfied with, right? So we have to wait. Okay, going briefly into Levinas. So remember how Nietzsche is saying that Christianity is this big story that we tell ourselves to feel more comfortable in the world, right? Make sure you write this down. We tell this story to feel more comfortable in the world. Levinas actually going to agree with Nietzsche that this is a pathetic way to see God. And he's going to kind of like swerve, right? And say, actually, religion is not about comfort. Religion is about discomfort, right? And Nietzsche might actually resonate with this. And we're going to see what Levinas means when he says religion, true spirituality is not supposed to be comfortable, right? So Nietzsche, in a way, might be more inclined to hear this version of events, right? So I'm just giving you the two different paths we're going to explore in response to Nietzsche, but I invite you also, think yourselves, right? If you come from any religious background, try to begin to think up of a response, right? And you can talk about it in your essays, right? I would be really happy to read some of you wrestling with this, right? But try to think about it. Okay, Harkstark and then Alim. Okay, Levinas, so he wants me to read. So Levinas, all I said is that really, for Nietzsche, Christianity is is creating a religion of comfort, right? We create religion because we want to feel comfortable. And Levinas is going to say that true spirituality actually is supposed to make us uncomfortable, supposed to be a source of discomfort. And this is what actually Nietzsche might resonate with a little more, right? Because Nietzsche is actually quite ready for discomfort. Make sense, Harkstark, for now?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, Alim, go ahead. You had something to say.
Kind of like to respond from like the other point of view. Like I agree with a lot of what like Nietzsche says. Nietzsche, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but like we can't say that God doesn't exist like 100%. So like yeah, like you can try to say that it's imaginary, but you can't 100% say that it doesn't exist.
Very good. That's one line of, that's one direction, right? Nietzsche seems a bit sure of himself, doesn't he? You know, we don't know. I always say that the agnostic position is the smartest because this is the position that you're not sure, right? So in many ways, Nietzsche seems a bit too sure of himself, right? When he's affirming, how does he know, right? So he's right, that we can't know for sure that there is a God, but likewise, we can't know for sure that there isn't one, right? So very nice direction, Aline. That's a good direction you can take, absolutely. Anything else before we conclude? Okay, good. Great. Let me stop the